Welcome to this video on visualization training. Today we're going to do some easy and fun exercises. They are from step 2, thinking ahead. They're all opening tactics and they are for players, I would estimate, with an over-the-board rating between 800 and 1300. Visualization is very important. It's not about only having a clear image of the target position and then assessing what the change dynamics are in the position, and then ultimately doing the orientation, calculation and verification. But it also improves your board vision, so you don't have 4 quadrants or one island with a sea around it, but you see the complete board and you get fluent in naming the squares. So let's get started. So you see the position, black is to move, and we have 2 moves. So the moves that are given are d takes e4, knight takes e5. And one of the things that helps, of course, is identifying what the vulnerabilities are, what the characteristics are that we can exploit. So d takes e4, knight takes e5. And if you ask yourself, okay, what's a vulnerability? After d takes e4, knight takes e5, the knight on e5 is undefended. So that is one element. And then the second element is that the white king is still in the middle. And once you see those two, you can say, how can I exploit that? And then you find the solution, queen a5. So we have d takes e4, knight takes e5, and then we have the move queen a5 with a double attack on the knight on e5 and the king on e1. Okay, next one. So here we have queen g3, g6. So again, let's discuss some characteristics, vulnerabilities. If you move a pawn in front of your king, of course, you weaken the king, the position of the king. And in addition, which squares have been weakened? They are crying out loud, which is f6, g7 and h8, the dark squares around the black king. And secondly, an important characteristic that the bishop on c4 is spinning the pawn on f7. And if you combine those characteristics, you will find the solution queen c3. Now some players might have played after queen g3, g6, queen takes c7, winning a pawn. But let's evaluate what would happen after the move d5. The queen on c7 is undefended, the bishop on c4 is under attack. But after queen takes e7, bishop takes e7, bishop takes d5, black is a pawn up. So it's not about the material that you gain in a position, it's about the final position after the combination has taken place. So now let's do the moves. Queen g3, g6, right? And we said after queen c3, the mate on g7 cannot be defended because the f-pawn is pinned and cannot move forward. So white is winning on the spot. And then just to give the other line, if white plays queen takes c7 to win the pawn, black plays the queen is undefended. And now if we evaluate the position, both sides have the same amount of minor pieces, but black has a b7 pawn extra, and black is better in this position. So let's see what's happening here. Knight h4, g5. So in the opening, of course, there are some typical weaknesses. We're doing opening tactics. One of the weaknesses is the square f7 and the square f2. Another weakness that often plays a role is the diagonal h5 to e8. And by playing g5, there's a major vulnerability in the sense that this diagonal has been weakened, and of course it cries out for the move queen h5 check, and then the king can only go to e7, and can you find the mate in 1 in that position. So we have knight h4 g5 attacking the knight on h4, but white disregards that and plays queen h5 check. The king has only 1 square to go to, e7, and then it's mate with knight f5. So knight h4, g5, right? Every pawn move has consequences, and this has weakened this diagonal, and after it is mate. Let's go to the next game. Bishop takes c6, b takes c6. Okay, so what are the changed dynamics? What has changed in the position? After bishop takes c6, b takes c6, the queen and the bishop on b4 has become undefended. And in the video attacking targets, we learned that if we want to find the target mating square, we do 2 moves with the same color and mate. And so after bishop takes c6, b takes c6, 2 moves with the same color and mate would be queen d4, queen takes g7. So we found an idea, and actually in this case it's immediately the solution, because queen d4 not only threatens mate on g7, but also attacks the undefended bishop on b4. So b takes c6, and now queen d4 with a double attack on g7 and the undefended bishop on b4. Knight c3, knight takes d4. So the bishop is spinning the knight on f3, and the knight on d4 is now also attacking the knight on f3, threatening to damage the pawn structure of white. But what has changed? The knight on d4 is undefended. The king on e8 is still in the middle, and we can take advantage by playing the move queen a4 check. And you would say, but the knight can return to c6, right? Interpose and defending the king on e8, but then white has queen takes g4. So there were actually 2 pieces undefended, the bishop on g4, the knight on d4, and queen a4 wins a piece. So knight c3, knight takes d4, queen a4 check, and in the case of knight c6, defending against a double attack by using one of the targets, we have the move queen takes g4, picking up a piece after all. So let's see what's going on here. White plays knight e5, and the black knight from c6 takes on e5. So white sacrificed a knight, but with a purpose, because the knight on c6 had an important defending task. What was the knight on c6 defending? The pawn on a7. And who are attacking the pawn on a7? The bishop on e3 and the queen on a4. So white can take advantage of it by playing in this position. Queen takes a7, and after king c8, queen e8 checkmate. Queen e2, bishop takes f3. So the bishop has taken the knight on f3, and is threatening to take the queen. So there's a lot going on, right? We have a discovered attack with a knight, the bishop on b5 is hanging, our queen is hanging. So what is the best move? Right? And we have two discovered attacks with a knight that are double checks. And against the double check, there's only one defense. That is a move by the king. So we have knight d6 and knight f6. So before we think about capturing the bishop, we first have to evaluate knight d6 and knight f6. So after knight d6, the king can still move. But after knight f6, it's a double check, and the knight on f6 guards the square d7, and it is checkmate. So bishop e2, bishop takes f3, and checkmate in 1, and we disregard the attack of the bishop on e2 because we have a double check. Queen takes b5, c6. So the queen on b5 is under attack. What can we do? We can move away with the queen, but we also have a capture ourselves, and we can attack the black queen. Can you find the best solution? So in this case, right, we have to evaluate the capture. E takes f6. So queen takes b5, c6, e takes f6, and then c6 takes b5, and f6 takes e7. What has happened? We won the knight on f6, and both sides won a queen. So on a net basis, we won one piece. And that's better than moving away. So c6 we take. We are not afraid. Black doesn't have any checks on e1 because that's covered by the knight. And now white is up a piece. Queen takes b7, queen c6. So the queen on c6 is defending the rook on a8 and protected by the knight on b8. So how to continue? Do we exchange the queens? Do we check on c8? Or do we play something else? And also notice that the queen on c6 is attacking the bishop on c4 and the pawn on e4. But we can pin the attacker by playing bishop b5. So bishop, queen takes b7, queen c6, and now the move bishop b5 wins the queen by pinning it. And the queen on c6 can no longer take on b7 or take on e4. d5, black plays d5, and white responds e takes d5. So what has changed in the position, and are there any vulnerabilities on the white side? d5, e takes d5. And you will notice that the queen on d4 and the king on g1 are on one line, on one diagonal. And can black exploit that vulnerability, that the queen and the king are on one line? Yes, by playing the move bishop c5. So you can see the change in dynamics, and that often when you move your pawns, bishops become more active, and in this case it wins the queen by pinning the queen to the king. b5, bishop takes b5. Okay, let's remember what we said about the opening. Typical vulnerabilities are f2 and the diagonal h4 to e1. What is going on? The bishop on b5 is undefended. If we could do two moves with black, can you find a mate? So two moves with black and mate to find the mating square. Right? And then you could say if queen f2 would be checkmate, what is the route to f2 that is available? And the route is queen b6, queen takes f2. But if we play queen b6, we are at the same time attacking the undefended bishop on b5 and we win a piece. With a double attack on the bishop on b5 and the pawn on f2. Knight e5, queen g5. What is going on? Knight e5, queen g5. So the queen on g5 is attacking the undefended knight on e5, but white can capture the bishop on e3. So if white captures on e3, black will capture on e5 and it becomes a trade. So is there any smart thing white can do to make this a better situation? And white has an intermediate move. So white can move the target, knight e5, away with tempo, and then one move later take the bishop. Knight e5, queen g5, knight f3, attacks the queen on g5, and after the queen moves, white will pick up the bishop on e3. H takes g5, h takes g5. What is going on here? So the h file has been opened. The two rooks, which are both undefended, are looking at each other. And the queen on f6 is under attack. So what to do with black here? H takes g5, h takes g5. The h file is open and the queen on f6 is under attack. So we have to look at forcing moves because of the current situation. And the solution that you find it is queen takes f2. And after queen takes f2, bishop takes f2, king takes f2, black plays rook takes h1. Do you notice why instead of queen takes f2, bishop takes f2 is incorrect? White can move to d1 with the king, and then the situation continues that the two rooks are looking at each other and the queen on f6 is under attack. So black has to take with the queen on f2. So we have h takes g5, h takes g5, h file has opened, f6 is under attack. The right continuation is queen takes f2, queen takes f2, bishop takes f2. And if we do the net at the end of the line, black has lost the bishop and black has lost the bishop but picked up a rook and a pawn in the process. And what we were saying here, if black would play bishop takes f2, the king moves away, and now the dynamics are still the same, that black would like to save their queen, but at the same time their rook on h8 is under attack. Knight c3, a rook takes b2. So a lot of players say, this is impossible. I don't see anything, right? What can I do here? knight c3, rook takes b2. So what do we see? The rook on b2 is undefended, and the king is not on its usual place on e8, but on d8. Can you find a move by which you at the same time attack the rook on b2 and the king on d8? So can you find a double attack on the rook on b2 and the king on d8? And the surprising answer is, of course, long castle. Check on the king by the rook, and the king is attacking the rook on b2. The last one, number 15. Bishop b5 check, king d8. What to do? We also look at the material balance. Black is up a minor piece. So a move like knight g5, queen d5 doesn't cut it. So we have to find something else. And the way to solve that is to say, if you could dream and pick up a rook, where would you place it? So bishop b5 check, king d8, pick up a rook, put it anywhere on the board. So that would be my target square. And then you would say, oh, now I see that actually rook e8 would be checkmate. And then the route to e8 becomes evident because you play the move rook e1. So bishop b5, king d8, rook e1, pinning the queen on e4 to the square e8, and thereby winning the queen. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this fun and easy exercises, opening tactics, and I hope if you like this video that you subscribe and come back. Have a great day.